Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to be trying to help you make your music audibly louder by explaining just how important it is that you use high-pass filters on almost every single track in your mix, including the kick and the bass. Now, I'm not talking about using a high-pass filter up to 100 or 200 Hertz. In this video, I'm really talking about the extremely low and sub-frequencies between about 0 Hertz and 20 Hertz. After my mastering tutorial got a lot more traction and views than I thought it would, many people understood it, but a lot of people also commented in confusion, asking why on earth am I removing these frequencies below 20 Hertz if you can't hear them or if speaker systems can't recreate them. And in this video, I really want to help explain why it is very important to remove those frequencies. I've got a few examples, some of them are a little bit exaggerated, just to really try and explain exactly why you need to remove these frequencies if you want as much volume and as much clarity in your mix as possible. So let's get right into it. So the first thing that I am going to clarify is that human hearing on average is between 20 Hertz at the lowest and about 20 kilohertz at the highest. Sometimes people can push the boundaries a bit, but those are the limits based on the human ear. The second thing is that your exported wave file, your final master or mixdown, if you're working at 44.1 kilohertz, will contain all the sounds from 0 Hertz all the way up to just over 22 kilohertz. It's half of 44.1 kilohertz. What this means is that your final wave file will contain sound that you can't even hear. Whether or not it's reproduced on a speaker system, you physically won't be able to detect it as sound. So I'm just going to show this wave file as an example. I'm using span here, and I'm just going to show that the final exported wave file does contain everything between 0 and about 22 kilohertz. So you can see here, there's noise down here at 1 and 2, 10, 20, we can't hear this stuff. And then if I zoom all the way into the top, just over 20, there's still some noise there. And what I'm trying to demonstrate is that just because you can't hear it, the computer technically does hear or see it. It still interprets those extremely low and extremely high frequencies as energy that is taking up a chunk of the overall allowed energy of that wave file. That point is very important for one of my next examples. But the next thing I'm going to show is a sub. So it's a pure sine tone. And just a disclaimer, this is going to be loud, so I'm going to turn it down before I upload this to YouTube. Don't turn your speakers up trying to listen to this because you might hurt yourself. You won't be able to hear it no matter what you do. The only thing you'll be able to hear is distortion. So if I press play now, I can't hear anything at all. This is at 12 Hertz on span. It's a pure sine tone with no upper or lower harmonics. Even though these headphones technically go all the way down to 5 Hertz, that's at 12. I can't hear it, even though my ears are probably being blasted with some sort of noise. In fact, I'm just looking at my speakers trying to recreate this, so I'm just going to show you this. My speakers are trying their very hardest to recreate this noise, and it's just flapping the cone about like crazy. Anyway, getting back to the point, this sub, we can't hear it, but it's taking up energy in our mix. And this really is an extreme example, but if I put it through a limiter, such as ozone, so that I have it pretty much clipping, we can see that the master channel is completely clipping with a sound that we can't hear at all. And while this is an extreme example and no one's really going to have a sub that low, it's just to reinforce the point that just because you can't hear it, it doesn't mean that it's not something to be concerned about. So now I'm going to move on to 2 full mix examples. And I have a mix here where I've exaggerated the bottom end, so there's a lot more information around 5, 10, 15 Hertz that we can't hear. But I'm going to show you how it affects the audible parts of the spectrum. So right now I'm going to play the mix and I'm just going to show you everything that's in it. So we have a wide range of frequencies from about 10 Hertz all the way up to 22 kilohertz. And what I'm doing is running it through a high pass first. So I'm removing stuff below about 25 Hertz or so. Then I'm running it into a compressor so you can see some gain reduction. And then I'm running it into this limiter. So I'm simulating a mastering situation. So the ceiling is at -1 dB and I've lowered the threshold until I'm getting quite a lot of limiting on those peaks. You can see the limiting pumping away here. So it's pretty heavy limiting, but now if I remove the low cut and all of that low end information is allowed to flood in, it will be triggering the compressor and triggering the limiter an awful lot more than I want it to. And if I press play, this is going to sound pretty awful. So we can see that there's just a huge amount of limiting all the time. And this is where things get really interesting. So I exported both of those earlier, one with the low cut and one without. So if we listen to the master that had the low cut engaged before the limiter, we'll see what RMS it reads. So we're pushing at about -8 or so. Now the one without the low cut, so letting all those low frequencies trigger the compressor. We're pushing up closer to -6, but if I was to increase the volume of the low cut one until they said the same value on this RMS meter, and now I'm going to do a comparison between the one with and without the low cut, and there's a huge difference in the perceived loudness, even though technically the waveforms read the same energy. And that's not to mention the fact that the one without the low cut sounded really, really bad and squashed because the low end was triggering all of that compression. And I know that while this is a pretty extreme example and it's very exaggerated, it's just to show you that those low end frequencies that build up across every track in your mix can end up having quite a profound effect on how loud you can push it. Very simply, the one with the low cut was just removing extra energy so that you could actually push those audible frequencies a lot further with the limiter before it started sounding bad. Whereas if you don't have the low cut, you can't push the limiter quite as audibly loud before you start getting distortion and really bad sort of squashed and just nasty sounding music, to be honest. So I really hope that shed a little bit of light on the situation, but pretty much the take-home points are just that your spectrum meter or a dB meter doesn't actually represent what you hear. It only represents what the computer sees in sort of ones and zeros in binary of the actual audio wave file. And if that wave file happens to contain frequencies between 0 and 20 hertz that you can't even possibly hear no matter what system they're played back on, those higher frequencies are going to suffer as a result. And although this is a very exaggerated video, there are times when, if you're mixing 100 tracks and people are using samples that aren't very carefully produced or curated, or you're recording a lot of live stuff and there's a lot of hum, static, room noise, air conditioning, footsteps, thumps, traffic, rumble, plane flying overhead, all these things do actually build up. And there's been a couple of times when I look at the information at 5 hertz or 10 hertz and there's actually, a load of dB stacking up there, and you take them away and you don't need to worry about it. And the last thing I would say is that there's been quite a few professionals I've been working with lately who I've been blessed to meet, and they all do this as standard. It's very, very common for them, especially the mixing and mastering engineers, every single track. That we're not talking about high passing up to 50 or 100. That would be madness. If you high pass every single track up to 100 hertz or 200 hertz, you'd lose a lot. And the good thing is, this isn't even a technique you need to stress about. There's no right or wrong. You can just set your favorite EQ, set it as a little bit of a high pass, and you're good to go. And there's really nothing to worry about. And it really does give you a bit of peace of mind knowing that the music you are going to upload and share with the world is as good as it possibly can be. So thank you very much for watching. I hope that was helpful, and I hope to see you in the next video. By the way, there's going to be loads and loads of videos coming next week, so stay tuned for those. Probably about 10 or 15 different videos from me next week. So stay tuned. Bye for now.